5 different types of buyers are coming into the land market right now. We're going to identify the 5, discuss who these are. The groups are different and have been changing, as have the demographics of who is buying the land. And then, stay with me, there's a part about recreation land versus cropland and which one is a hotter commodity right now in the land market. We're going to talk with Doug Adams. He's the CEO of National Land Realty. The company is national. He is in Colorado. So, of course, we got to talk about buffaloes and how he grew up working on land and with the buffalo. It's a fascinating story to hear about how things were in his early days. And then we'll dig into cropland and what are the biggest interest points right now. We'll talk about data centers. But again, and this was not expected, Iran is a big thing that is hanging around the land market. We'll let Doug explain why on this installment of the MTOM podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. Glad to have you here. New episodes come out each and every Tuesday in both video and audio form. If you like the YouTube version and you just want to listen to it, great. If you like the audio podcast, that's wonderful as well. Send me an email, markettomarket@iowapbs.org if you have any feedback or if you have a guest idea for me. Thank you. Here's Doug and our conversation about land. There's a new way to stay connected and know what's happening with Market to Market when you subscribe to Market Insider. One email and a lot of information awaits you. Go to markettomarket.org and subscribe to Market Insider. Oh, and did I mention this is a special episode because it launches the 11th season of the MTOM podcast. We have been doing this now for a long time, a lot longer than the national average of podcasts. So we are thankful that you've made a part of your day with us. Now, really, I mean it. Let's get to Doug. Doug, right before we started recording, we had a summer storm go through here, but where you grew up, winter storms and wind was something that you probably dreaded because those animals still needed to be fed.
They did, yeah. Grew up a little buffalo ranch in the south central part of Colorado, right at the base of the Continental Divide. So, as a kid, you're sitting there saying, why did I get the bad draw here, out pushing hay bales with the wind blowing sideways and the snow going, the same direction. And, you ask yourself, why me? And now you look back on, 30, 40 years later, you're like, actually, thank you for letting it be me, because it taught you a lot of life lessons and some great stories about those very unique animals, chasing you around. And when they found their way outside of a fence, you got a call, and the row of traffic that would stack up on the side of the highway, gawking at those pretty amazing creatures was pretty impressive. So anyway, but it was quite the lifestyle growing up.
Well, which weather condition did buffalo like least?
They're such a resilient animal. Excuse me. I think if you were to ask them what they like least, it would be the heat, because they're such a big burly animal. And, I'm sure panting in the summer sun is not their first choice. They're so resilient, for all the weather conditions and history and the legacy of the animal and the beauty of the animal. I think they could really pretty much take on anything. But yeah, I would say the heat would probably be their least favorite thing.
Well, that ties in where I think we'll start. Let's talk about pasture ranges and the heat. That has been a story for land in Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, as they deal with drought and pasture land. What's the market like right now for, I'm not going to ask you to analyze the cattle movement of anything, but what's it like? Are people having to liquidate herds and land as well as times get tight with weather?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic going on, particularly as you just pointed out, the Southwest, has just been through a real struggle. Again, back to Colorado quickly, we had a really poor snowpack this year. So it's got a lot of people concerned about the tributaries and the aquifers and, of course, rivers and streams and lakes and water restrictions in the metro areas, and then of course irrigating becomes very concerning, and your animal per unit production goes down significantly. So people are having to rebalance their herds, rebalance kind of their portfolios, look elsewhere to diversify into more southeast regions of the country, if they can find it. Of course, you start getting into different land values then, and that can be very challenging as well. I think if you're in the farming and ranching business, and many people listening today are sure can relate to this, you're the eternal optimist. It's just we got one more storm and we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We look at the forecast and we're always very optimistic that it's going to turn around. So I think a lot of us are, resilient to that, but you also start to look at, the real hardcore facts and saying, okay, can we continue to make a living as we used to under these conditions? And it is challenging right now. So there are people, again, I would look at it as rebalancing their portfolio or their assets to find, where can they be most productive in these, current environment.
So there are some who can expand, and there are some who cannot and are selling off. So who the buyer is, we just had the passing of Ted Turner. He was a big purchaser of a lot of grazing lands and areas. I mean, is there another Ted Turner out there that's buying a lot of rangeland?
Yeah, there are. Fun fact: we actually sold part of our herd years and years ago to Ted, so we have a little tiny thread to his legacy. And so we like to say some of those great grandbabies that are running around his herd are ours. But yeah, there are people that are investing in land and have a real appreciation for it, particularly in the western states where there's still a lot of big acreages to be assembled. Montana, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, there's a lot of big purchases still going on. Texas, of course, has tons of land. So there are different stewards of land ownership that are out there, which I love. They have the resources to be able to do it. They're not doing it for development reasons. They're truly trying to preserve, the West. Again, some in the Southeast and the East as well. But as we all know, the migratory patterns of this country, as we start in the East and move West, it's that kind of Midwest and Rocky Mountain states still have those big holdings that these guys like to go after. And I think there are more that are coming. There are people starting to, interestingly enough, diversify out of some technology companies, and you would think that's like light years apart, but there's some very quiet money that are coming out of kind of the technology sector, and they're looking to diversify into land assets. Some of it being more commercial income producing, of course, but then others are really becoming very passionate about land and preserving land and really, putting their assets there as well, again, as a diversification tool, but also as a heritage tool, to pass on to their kids and their grandkids. So that's kind of exciting. And I think we'll always have that next. I don't know if we would call him the Ted Turners because he's got such an iconic brand out there, but people that do appreciate the same things that he appreciated, why he tried to acquire as much land as he did over the years.
You said the word tech. I wasn't planning to discuss this, but you bring it up. The tech part of land purchase right now is about data centers and people and companies acquiring areas that might have the water that we were just referring to, but also the space. Where are you at right now in that story? What's your connection? What are you seeing about people trying to acquire land in areas for these data centers?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely a hot topic right now because there's just more and more demand on storage and on capacity across the globe. And the biggest challenge that the world economy has with those data centers is really about the power. It's not so much about putting a concrete building up. That can be done just about anywhere, obviously, with the right economic variables in place. But it's really the power and the cooling of the power are the two big things that are a challenge. And so you have to go through what are your various modalities for that power? Is it nuclear? Is it water? Is it solar? where can you go to be able to establish those power grids and those power sources. So where the land becomes very compelling because the price per acre can be acquired, very affordably, let's say in West Texas or places like that, you can get your price per acre down extremely attractive. And so people clamor all over that. But now, you're miles and miles from power source. So what do you do with that? So you have to look at wind, you have to look at solar, and the kilowatt production of that just doesn't keep up yet. So that's where the struggle is. Now we're certainly involved in that. We have conversations going on all over the place right now. In fact, we just closed on a large data facility. Gosh, I think it was less than 2 weeks ago, and it was the resources to go into that type of investment are, I don't want to say unlimited, but it's robust. Let's put it that way, because the price point that it rather than say, here's our price point and we're going to negotiate down like happens so often in a real estate transaction, as we all know, the actual price kept ratcheting up because of time value of money to get established and the financing components and the structure behind it. It actually climbed significantly. I think it climbed about 20% from where we were at market value. So the resources are there. Again, it's the kind of harnessing thing that we're working with right now is the power source to be able to put them up and then have them be functional.
Let's move then, I guess, east. As you mentioned, West Texas. Let's go in the center part of the country, more of the grain states right now. What's the trend there?
Well, another big buzzword right now, or buzz topic, I guess I should say, is the fertilizer, right? Because the fertilizer that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz is obviously incredibly constrained right now. So as we look at where we're at in the production of this podcast and kind of our timing going into the fall, a lot of that fertilizer and all those crops are in the ground. So a lot of that is fine for this year. But where we're going to start to see some residual effect of that is going into, our winter crops and our spring productions next year, and getting that fertilizer. One, it's just not there. And two, when we can get it, it's extremely expensive. The classic supply and demand is in play here. So that's where we're going to see some real challenges, particularly in the corn production. So a lot of crops are rotating out of corn into soybean because, again, the fertilizer constraints that we're dealing with. So I would say we're going to see more and more going into soybean and less corn production. The corn production rates across the country are going to be down significantly this year. And we just hope we can get that release of the fertilizer ingredients to be able to do it the way we need to do it, not just in Iowa, but throughout the Midwest and other corn production states.
So fertilizer, is that going to impact more for rents, cash rents for producers, or is this going to force them into sales?
It's going to affect both, but definitely the cash rents are going to be impacted significantly. I just, there's such obviously a supply chain connection all the way through from, farm to table, that everything is going to be impacted. And I hate to be, the bearer of bad news. Again, like farmers and ranchers, us in the real estate business are always the internal optimist as well, right? There's another transaction, there's another buyer, there's another deal around the corner. So we kind of have that same mindset, but we also have to be, pragmatic about what's going on in the world. Due to weather situations with what we anticipate is a super Nino this year and some incredibly hot standards that are even above what we're used to. And then again, some of the constraint functions due to the Iran conflict. We're just going to have to be prepared for an economic shift across all tables and all mediums. But one thing about farming and ranching, it's an incredibly resilient group of people. And, we find a way, and I'm sure we'll find a way here. We'll get better at our craft, and we'll get better at what we do and being able to get the production out of the ground that we look for. But it's definitely going to have some challenges in the near and hopefully not distant future, but certainly in the near future, it's going to have some challenges.
Well, Doug, I'm sure you've done your research and you know where this question's coming from. We go back to the discussion all the time right now of what was the late 70s, early 80s like. And the equation of the farm crisis was One of them, high interest rates, which was impacting all the loans. But then there was also the land sales, land ownership. There wasn't as much land being owned by the producer, it was owned by the bank. Where are we at right now in comparison from where you sit as a real estate person nationally looking? How do we compare to those late 70s? I guess don't even answer the interest rate part of that, but just where farmers and owners sit today.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was actually having a conversation with Nate, one of our really good producing agents there in Iowa yesterday. We were talking about some of the things he's seeing and, some of the trends and whatnot. And it's funny, it's a lot of the lending practices kind of go against sort of the conformity of looking at, production rates and land values, and you kind of the banking industry is actually being very supportive of land transactions. When you would look at the actual financial metrics of it, you say this doesn't make sense, but they're still supporting the farming industry quite well. Now, again, that doesn't mean it's applying to everybody, but they are being much, I would say much more lenient in their lending practices right now, albeit the interest rate game is going to be in play here because the anticipation was we were going to get 1 to 2 points reduction in the interest rates this year. Well, now with the conflict in Iran and some of the other things in the market, it looks like it's holding strong, and maybe we might even see a hedge against inflation. So that's got a little bit of a lockup going on with the transfer of land assets and the lending practices. As I would look back to the question, to the 70s and 80s and the crisis that happened then, I don't think we're going to have the same headwinds of the high interest rates that we saw coming out of the 70s and into the 80s, and oil embargoes and things that were in place then. We have better overall economic, bumpers on our system now than we did then. We've learned from some mistakes, obviously, even through the early 2000s when we went through the residential crisis then, that really reset the real estate market and also reset some of our lending practices, residential, commercial, and land alike. So I don't think we'll go into any kind of situation like we did 50 years ago. Just due to some practices that are in place today that weren't then. Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to have some challenges, as we said, but we're just not going to see those high interest rates like we did then. I say that we never know what's coming around the corner with another conflict. If China gets involved, there's a China-Taiwan thing going on, which has always been there, but that seems to be heating up a little bit. So if there's another conflict that happens to arise unexpectedly, then that could create some other strains on interest rates as well. But as we sit here today, we're not going to see, these abnormally high interest rates, which is going to, create even more of a headwind like we did, again, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
You say bumpers, I say diversity in the economics. That's
Yeah.
a good way to put it. The bumpers are there. You mentioned you'd had the conversation with the one of your Iowa folks. Let's just very much drill down to that state then. I don't want your homework to go to waste. What's the headline right now in Iowa real estate?
I think the headline, particularly in the farm sector, is that the land is in very strong hands right now. There's just not a lot coming to market. It's really taking a transition of ownership through death as much as anything. It's just really not coming to market. And when it does come to market, 67 to 70% of the transfer is going from one farmer to another local farmer. There was a little bit of a buzz out there for a bit about international buyers coming in and buying up all the U.S. land, and we've sold out to China and all that. And that's really not true. There is some international investment for sure. Like, any hedge fund or investment group that's looking to diversify their portfolios, they look at the ag sector as, an opportunity. And so there is some of it, but honestly, it's a minor fraction. There's really 5 different things that are going on. There's 5 different, buyers, if you will. And again, it really is taking a death in the family or in the farm for it to actually transfer ownership. And so the first one is existing farmers are buying 65, 70% of the land. Local non-farm investors are making up another, say, 20%. In other words, I talked a little bit ago about the tech sector. It's not just tech sector, but it's other business people. Excuse me. Again, talked with Nate yesterday. He has a client that owns dealerships, and he buys 1,000 acres almost every year or thereabout. He's just looking to diversify his portfolio. We do have some institutional and REIT investors and buyers, and then we have people coming out of what some people will be familiar with the tax code, a 1031 tax deferred exchange. And for those that aren't familiar, where you go from one asset, you have an appreciation of that asset, so you're going to have a capital gains consequence to that. So to avoid that or to delay that paying that fee or that tax, you can roll it into what they call a like investment. It can be out of an apartment complex into a farming operation or whatever. So we're seeing some money move out of other asset classes into farmland and ranch land. And then again, the very small minority is the foreign buyers are looking into the market as well. So that's kind of like our investment kind of makeup, if you will, into the farm sector, particularly in Iowa and the Midwest. But again, it comes back to you got to have something to buy. And when it's in strong hands and it's kind of neighbor to neighbor farming transfer, there's really not a ton coming to the market. There's also a diversification with the recreational land versus the production land, and we can talk a little bit about that if you want to. But that's creating some diversification in our buyer makeup as well.
You said car dealer. I didn't hear you say doctor or dentist. I heard they were always looking to buy. Are they interested in farmland right now?
You bet. They're always out there. They're always looking, especially if they have any kind of roots to, growing up in a farming family or a ranching family where, that's kind of something they want to get back to, or they want to start creating a legacy for their kids or grandkids. Very much so. I think anybody that has, kind of a liking or a love with the land, whether it be from their upbringing or whatever the case might be, they're always kind of looking to acquire more of that. And then if they have that, that passion for hunting or fishing or, any kind of recreation on the land, that's very much in play as well.
Well, and the recreation side, that's a story a friend of mine I grew up with. He has a neighbor that I'm 99% sure, because he won't say it exactly, is an NFL player who has bought the land for the recreation side, and he is not alone with other athletes buying that. So yes, anecdotally, I can confirm what you're saying. But I want to go back to the buyer, the 60 to 70% local buyer.
Yeah.
What's the age and the makeup of that right now? Is that older or younger than it was, say, 2 to 5 years ago?
I think it's a pretty good mix. It's typically, I'd say, a little bit younger demographic. Again, as you kind of look at the demographic and, the aging farming population, if they are still very progressive in the market, they'll look to acquire some more land and some more production. But a lot of times it's there's been sort of an internal transfer within the family. So the next generation is now taken over. They're more ambitious. Their debt load is probably less. And so now they're in a position to be able to acquire more. So, I don't know if I could pin down, 45 versus 65, but if I were to kind of throw a dart at that board, I would say you're looking more in that, 50-year-old demographic, 45, 50, where that 60, 65, 70-year-old is more looking at kind of their sunset and their transfer of the next generation of farming, whether it's to a family member or to a neighboring farmer or whatever. But once kind of that next generation is starting to take over, they're a bit more aggressive in the market.
Well, and I almost interrupted you because that's contrary to some of the stories that we had heard a year ago, is that it was the 70-plus buyer that was coming in, somebody who wasn't going to be farming it long term, but kind of back to what you'd said earlier about needed a place to park some cash, and they were buying it. But you're saying that maybe that tip is finally, we've kind of gone over to the younger side. So that's going to change things a little bit. What's the headline of that going to mean then, if it is a younger buyer than an older buyer?
Well, I think what you would likely see is that embrace technology more and more, and AI is the big buzzword in the world these days, right? I say that there's companies out there that are saying, yeah, we're AI empowered, and they don't even know what it means or how it means, but they want to have that kind of leading catchphrase to their business, whether it be in the real estate industry or the farming industry or retail or whatever it might be. So to answer your question, I think what you're going to see is more technology enabled farming practices. That makes some people nervous, right? That there's not going to be a human being sitting on that combine or that tractor or whatever the case might be going forward. Well, there's still going to be a human involvement to it all, but you're going to see, I think, just better production. You're going to see people that are going to have better data to analyze their farming practices and be able to embrace where there was an instinctual practice before, a damn good instinctual practice over the years. But as as the world continues to spin and technology continues to evolve, you can use some of these analytics and some of these practices to be even sharper and even better, and to be able to squeeze even more production out of a farming operation than you were able to before, which of course will drive up your margins if it's done right. So I think you'll see that, kind of embracing of that next evolution of farming practices, just like we did 20 years ago. There was a evolution then, or even 30 years ago, where, satellite imagery was okay, but today it's really, really good, and we have soil studies and water drainages and just overall data analytics that we didn't have before that are getting better and better every day. So I think, to answer your question, I think you'll see just even better production coming from a lot of the operations.
So you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, this is the buyer is more interested in the product than just as an investment.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think there's a balance in there, right? There's the diversification out of other investment mediums, but then there's also, okay, we're going to invest, but how do we get it better? How do we do even improve production and efficiencies in our operations? So I think you're going to see both, and that's exciting. That's really pretty cool when you get people that are open minded and they're investing into what can be, not what is, right? That makes it really exciting. There's going to be some mistakes along the way, of course, but through mistakes, there's also a lot of learning and a lot of development, a lot of new opportunities. So I think it's going to be exciting. Again, there's a lot of challenges. There always has been in our industry, but it's such a resilient group of people. I mean, I have so much respect for whether it be rent or own or investment or otherwise, to be able to do what we do in this country, to be able to produce so much for the rest of the world, is just incredible. So it's very exciting time, actually.
I want to go back to those 5 that you were referring to of buyers. I want to talk just quickly about the foreign owned. Usually when you look at the data, it is European, Canadian, Mexican, not China. Is that consistent with what you've seen? And are there states that made laws that now you have to pay attention to a little bit more, and how you can help clients buy and sell land?
Yeah, those trends are very consistent, as you said. Europe, Canada, Mexico are by far the largest investors in the U.S. farm market. There is China is such a delicate subject to bring up because President Trump has a love-hate relationship there, and tariffs and then no tariffs, and kind of the dance that's going on there. But the consistency of that foreign buyer has not really changed that much. It's also can be challenging too, because there's so many shell entities that are coming in, and you have to kind of really drill down to find out what the ownership of that entity is, that LLC or that S corp, which can be discoverable, of course. But for the most part, it's friendly investments that are coming into the country, and it actually opens up even better trade practices in a lot of ways. So, I don't think we're going to see a tremendous change in that, that investment makeup from the international buyer. It will be interesting. Brazil is really kind of top of mind for me right now, not so much as an investment piece, but with the cattle market being, one of the largest beef productions in the world coming out of Brazil, and them having their own challenges, I'm very curious to see what ends up happening with Brazil, over the next 12 to 24 months. Not that you asked about Brazil, you're asking
But
about.
it's always of interest to our audience. So are you saying that the Brazilians are buying in the U.S. or the U.S. is buying in Brazil? I want to make sure I get that right.
I Yeah, I think there's going to be more investment from the U.S. into Brazil than Brazil into the U.S. Reason being is because they have again such a strong beef market there for the world. What's got me curious though is they're going to have some, at least the predictions in the weather. They're going to have some real constraints this year with some high heat, most likely throughout the rest of this year. And so, what's that going to mean for the cattle market down there? There's already been some significant investment from U.S. companies into Brazil. They have their own laws down there where you have to have a certain Brazilian ownership makeup. So you can't just come, you and I couldn't say, hey, let's put a little LLC together and run down there and buy some land and run some cows. We have to partner up with a Brazilian entity, a significant amount. It has been 50% in the past. I think some of those laws have relaxed a little bit, but, so there's a dynamic there, but it's been very attractive for U.S. investment to go into Brazil in many ways. However, with this super El Nino, as they're predicting, it may create some backlash to it. Will those investments pay off? And so as you kind of rotate through the cycle there, if they in fact end up having some real challenges down there due to the climate, then that could actually become a win for the cattle market in the U.S. because now you're going to have more production here and probably more opportunities for the cattle market to thrive. Again, there's a lot of thumb in the wind guesswork on some of this, but that I could very much foresee that playing out very well for the cattle market here in the U.S.
And one last thing on the foreign ownership side, were there any states that passed laws in their legislatures this spring and winter that have changed? Like you said, the Brazilian having to be a certain makeup of home ownership. Any state laws of interest that we need to be aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. Nothing of significance. Now, I think there are some things in legislation right now that are being talked about, but if there are, again, we're covering almost all 50 states, so there might be some there that I'm not, exposed to just yet, but not significant. Again, there may be a viewer or listener today say, actually, my state, that's not true. And so if I missed one, I apologize, but I haven't seen anything kind of from a broad sweeping perspective.
Here's Doug's home phone number. Call him right now.
That's right. Call me out. Call me out. Wouldn't be the first person to call me out.
Doug, let's do a discussion here. I know we drilled heavily on Iowa, but in the last couple of minutes here, what regions are hot right now for farmland sales? Which ones are cooling off? And is there anything in between that's of interest?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's some politics involved too. Like when I look at Illinois, for example, there's a bit of a migratory pattern out of Illinois and more into other Midwest states that have good production because of taxes and things of that nature. So it's not so much driven off of the production of the land per se, but due to some tax consequences and some legislation that's in on a local level. The timber market is another one. I don't know if we want to walk down that path or not, but it kind of is it's obviously an asset class within the land business, and it's been very attractive to investors over the years. Now, the timber market is soft right now. So, do you do the opportunity buyer where you say, contrarian thinking, you go in where the market's down and then you are the benefactor as the market comes back? But the timber market has been very strong. So to answer your question, which areas have been, particularly hot, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, some of those strong timber markets have been good because they also create the ability to diversify with the recreational buyers. So you can go in and acquire attractive land and have a certain subset of that be very much rec based and another piece of it be more timber based. And you have that kind of mix and match where you can kind of maximize your investment, if you will. So there's a lot of a lot of investment kind of in those regions have done very, very well for us over the last few years, and they continue to have a good year this year. As we close in on midpoint of this year. Those areas are still doing very well. So Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas are also doing very well right now. And again, I have to be careful to say it's not specifically to the farm production or the ag production, but for other reasons. And they're rotating, crops out of some of the ag production and looking at other asset classes as well. I think some of that is also driven out of a demand for getting out of the Northeast or the upper Midwest as well, due to, retirement opportunities as well, where they'll move to a warmer climate, kind of that Sun Belt driven kind of buyer where they want to live there or part-time live there. And they say, okay, we love it here. We want to acquire some land. And then they start talking about what's that land going to be for? Is it for recreation? Is it for investment? Is it for transitional wealth to grandkids, whatever the case might be. So there's a lot of different things kind of playing into that southeast part of the country that's doing very well right now.
Which is, yeah, exactly. That has been hot. And when you said Northeast, is that where they're exiting? I mean, there's timber in Northeast as well, but then we start getting into discussions about lumber with Canada and trade issues there. And we're back to, sounds familiar, we're on that same cycle.
That's right. Yeah, very much so. And you're right. There is a lot of good production in the Northeast from a timber perspective, but kind of more of a climate-driven buyer, if you will, is kind of pushing more into that Southeast. And as you said, it's been a good market for a while, and it doesn't seem to be really. It's slowed down a bit, but it's not like it's fallen off. Going, okay, everybody's running to New Mexico or Nevada or something. Now, there's a southwestern play right now, but that's a different type of buyer. That's truly more of a retirement snowbird type buyer versus people that are looking for production off the land. You got to have the water, right? At the end of the day, if you don't have water, it's probably the most critical resource in this country. And those that live in the West can really appreciate that because it's such a high commodity and it's such high demand, and it becomes to be more of a scarcity these days where you get into the Southeast. Anybody living there is like, we got more water than we know what to do with. So that gives you lots of options and lots of opportunities to do different things. So I think that trend will continue in that Southeast due to climate conditions, production. And again, water is just such a critical resource, and it's in abundance there.
All right, Doug, let's close with this. The rest of 2026, what's that crystal ball there behind you on the shelf? What are the 2 or 3 things that are going to really dictate which way we're moving with sales?
Yeah, no, I hate to pin everything on the Iran conflict, but it really does have a big impact on the global economy. And as we drill down into the land business, there is always going to be a demand for land. Which type of land and what product type, if you will, in the land business is always going to kind of move around a little bit. But we're optimistic. Again, farmers, ranchers, real estate professionals that are listening today, we're all the eternal optimists. And so I would always sit here and say we're very optimistic, and we are optimistic. Land is a limited resource, so as long as there's a limited resource on this earth, such as land, it's always going to have some demand. So I think we're going to continue to see strong sales in the land business. It's just kind of that diversification of where is the money going to play. We talked about the data centers earlier, so that's an increased pressure point that people need a significant amount of land to be able to do that. So I think we're very optimistic for the back half of this year. I would love to see the Iran conflict start to wind down and start to see a free up of trade again. There's always going to be a challenge in our world, right? If we look back at our grandparents and our parents, there was something going on then too, whether we're coming out of World War II, Vietnam, high interest rates, oil embargoes. Like there's always been challenges in our world. And so that's no different today. And so we have to navigate those challenges with good leadership, good stewardship, wise decision making as we go. But I think for us being in the land business, we're we're honored here at National Land Realty that we continue to grow. We continue to have more good brokers and agents ask about our brand and what we're doing, and we feel like we're in a great position to be able to provide a great platform for brokers and agents to work with us and provide world class service to people that are looking to buy land or people that are looking to sell land. A lot of people are looking to expand their land assets right now, and again, that's our biggest challenge, is being able to create inventory for people to be able to acquire. Real quick, thing in Iowa, like if we had 50, 80 acre tracts to take to market today that had a good, whitetail hunting on it, and maybe a little bit of production, I mean, it would sell immediately. You can pretty much ask your price for it. So, it's creating that inventory for the market, because there are a lot of buyers still out there looking and scouring the internet every day, looking for their next purchase. So
is
I'd say we're all very optimistic.
the 80 with the whitetail more desirable than the 80 with the great crop score right now?
100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, if you've got good game management, good food plots out, and access to it that's easy access, whether it be through easements or right off of a main thoroughway of a road. I mean, it's in high demand right now. There is a lot of people looking for that, particularly in Iowa and other parts of the country. We can sell those all day, every day. So if you happen to be listening today and you have that 80 acre tract and you want to take it to market, give us a call, because we have a lineup of buyers ready to go.
So you have two reasons to call Doug. If there's a state that had a law, or if you've got some recreational land for sale. I think, did I get it right, Doug?
That's right.
All right.
I would prefer the latter for sure. But
sure.
We welcome all calls, all conversations. The more we can learn, the more we can work together with everybody, that the better we all are, actually.
Well, Doug, thank you for squeezing me in and giving us the update from where you're sitting about the land situation. Always fascinating to me. Thank you.
You bet. No, my pleasure. Great to visit with you today.
We are produced at Iowa PBS. Our production supervisor is Sean Ingracia. His crew is Reed Denker, Kevin Rivers, Julie Knutson, Neil Kyer, and David Feingold. The executive producer of Market to Market is David Miller. I'm Paul Yeager. We'll see you next time.